It's that time of the year again. It's the end of the year sales. Now, I know that most people are usually referring to the Steam sales when it comes to those end of the year sales because they're the ones who popularized the whole 75% off games in terms of the gaming landscape. But this year for me is going to be a little different. I am going to look at other platforms, aka GOG, the Epic Game Store, and maybe I'll even hit the Switch and the PS4, considering those are the consoles that I owned, at least if I have time. So, without further ado, these are the games that I think are worth picking up this holiday season. Now please note, I'm focusing on games that I feel got overlooked compared to their quality at the time of their release, and combining it with the amount of sales that you can get for the game. The lower the price, the more likely it's going to be on this list, especially if I think the game has been overlooked. First up, it's Fight and Rage, 50% off on the Steam store for $9.99. Let me be clear from the get-go with this game. Fight and Rage is one of the best beat-em-ups I've played in the past 10 years. In fact, it's probably just under Turtles in Time for my favorite beat-em-up of all time. Yes, that good. And while it has a cult following, it really deserves a lot more of the spotlight than it got when it released. Fight and Rage takes the beat-em-up formula that you would expect, basic enemies, special moves, bosses, and brings along a difficulty to boot that make you feel like you're back in the heyday of the NES and SNES era. However, the little additions of things like the parry system that reward you like a fighting game would, and a variety of combos that let you spatially control the battlefield puts it on another level. A lot of the reviews have said that it sticks close to the beat-em-ups of old, and while yes, there are elements for sure from there, what Fight and Rage does is combine them into what feels like a whole new crossover between the beat-em-up and fighting genre. Fights are tense with a fantastic soundtrack to accompany the fighting, along with some visual flair even though it's pixel artwork. Granted, you may not find the game on sale on console platforms, considering that they just recently made their way to them. But even at full price, I found that game to be a steal for the depth and unlockables you can get. So at half off on the PC? Yeah, you can't say no to that, now can you? Moving on, let's go next to Ghost 1.0, which is 65% off for $4.54. You knew that I wasn't going to make it through a sales list without at least one Metroidvania, and some may look at Ghost 1.0's visuals compared to games like Hollow Knight and Axiom Verge, and they may not be impressed. But under the surface is a lot of detail that pays homage to sci-fi and popular media of the 80s and 90s, along with a combat system that's chaotic in all the best ways. Switching between multiple weapons with a sliver of life and avoiding all the bullets and hazards around you is the game's strongest element, as the level design puts you into a lot of new situations that make you change your aggression and playstyle. However, exploration goes hand in hand in the gameplay here, as finding new parts of the ship feels almost Metroid-like, as it tells its own little story of what's going on without having to read a log of sorts. Really, when it comes down to it, Ghost 1.0 is a jack of all trades in the Metroidvania genre, and for less than $5, you really should give it a shot. Let's keep the Steam train rolling with Solitaritia, which I probably mispronounced, and is 60% off for $3.99. One of the more casual games on this list, the game takes roguelite elements and throws them into the world of Solitaire. And no, it is a lot more interesting than it sounds on the surface. The game is designed smartly around taking away some of the randomness of regular Solitaire with the skills available in each deck class. And there's a real addictive element of playing just another round thanks to the simplicity of this gameplay. Enemies have a good variety and have a lot of status effects that force you to change up your gameplay. And there's a real good balance in coin collection in collecting new powerful items that can tip you over your opponents. The animations and artwork is sharp and clean, and the sound design gives you tone hints to certain events of the game that you will really appreciate. It's the perfect game that you can take a chance on for $4 and find yourself playing it for 15, 30, even 45 hours, with little sessions here and there. Next up on the docket is Moonlighter, which is 60% off at $7.99. Think Zelda with a little bit of Rectetear thrown in the middle. The core 2 cycles of rolling through dungeons, collecting loot, and getting further and further, then selling those items back in town keeps a good pace where neither end up overdoing their stay. It helps that it's all done in the background of some lovely visuals in a pixel artwork style, using colors smartly in the small details like forest trees and the relics of previous adventurers who made their way through the dungeon. While the spear was a little bit overpowered on release, each weapon was still fun to use, and there was enough variety in enemies to allow those repeat runs to not feel like a horrible chore. Granted, those looking for complicated mechanics in any section of the game are going to be disappointed here, but the game's simplicity in many of its elements is the game's biggest strength. It's easy to pick up, and it focuses on core fun elements that everyone can get into. And yes, I know I dinged it for that in my original review, but on further retrospect, it's smartly done. It keeps the game not only a lifetime gamer can play and enjoy, but even someone new to the world. Next up on the list, Shadowrun Hong Kong, which is 75% off for $4.99. This may be the most inconsistent game that I'm recommending in this sale, but the highs of Shadowrun Hong Kong definitely make it worth a measly $5 in the big picture. Choice is the name of the game when Shadowrun, as you feel like each of your difficult choices of skill allocation to the actual in-game decisions make a huge difference on how you go about things, and actually can lead to actual consequences in the game, lo and behold. The world is really intriguing in the fusion of magic and cyberpunk elements, and there are fascinating characters like Gaichu and Raktor who you want to see the full story and their conclusions of, rather than them just being some side characters. The isometric combat may not be the best in the genre, but it definitely gets the job done and makes you put your thinking cap on. This is going to be more for the story crowd in the end, but those who dive into Hong Kong will really appreciate it. Next up on my list, Her Story, which is 90% off at 99 cents. Look, before you say anything, Her Story was one of those games that's fighting the reputation of the industry before it even hit the digital shelves when it came out. And sure, it was a critical darling, but the masses mostly looked at a FMV game with a $10 price tag and focusing on story, and said, no way, I'm not taking a chance on it. So, now that it costs less than a McDonald's double cheeseburger, maybe it's time for those skeptical of the genre and of the storytelling available in video games to maybe try and take a shot in the dark with this one. Unlike a lot of the cheesy acting you see in FMV games like Night Trap and Mad Dog McCree, our main actress Viv Severit, which I probably mispronounced horribly, puts on quite a performance, engrossing you in this true crime experience. Viewers of the channel know that I love a good "what happened" in my beloved Danganronpa series, and my mind was going wild with the possibilities, motives, and trying to figure out the truth of what was happening here. Sure, the light gameplay mechanic of finding keywords to continue filling in the gaps of information may not be groundbreaking, but it puts you in the detective role rather nicely, and helps pull the experience from a good story to a good game. Take a chance on it. You won't regret it. At this point, I'm running out of transitions, but next up, Victor Vran, 70% off at $5.99. If you're looking for an alternate experience to an action role-playing dungeon crawler, then Victor Vran is exactly the game to fill that void this holiday season. There are core elements of the genre here, of course, a variety of enemies to take down, loot to go through and pick up, and skills to use. But the formula here is a little bit altered, with a focus on only a couple of primary skills and weaponry that acts vastly different than your typical damage and speed alterations to weapons in the genre. Each of the weapons have a really unique playstyle that have very different strengths and weaknesses in handling hordes, defending against strong attacks, to putting yourself in the right spot after launching them. The focus on a small amount of skills and specials mean that you don't have the perfect solution in every situation. So you have to craft your two switchable loadouts very carefully to try to find what works for you. Now look, the story may not be anything to write home about, but it's offset by an interesting world that's constructed here and some fun characters you come across. Victor Vran is a game that offers you something completely different in the genre that usually sticks to the same formula, and usually that's for a lot of good reasons. Yet this game is able to pull off different successfully. Continuing on, let's go with Ape Out, which is 50% off at $7.49. Basically, if you wanted a more guerrilla-themed Hotline Miami, Ape Out is probably something that you already have, considering they're both published by Devolver Digital. If you somehow don't let the minimalistic style throw you off. The visuals express the game's semi-stealth, semi-smack all the things around rather nicely. The game's most striking feature, however, is the dynamic musical score, which ramps up and down based on the situation, adding to the tension smartly. There's great level design that keeps you on your toes, making you adjust to new angles to avoid enemy bullets, or having to make that precision body strike to take out that primary target to move forward. I also found the difficulty curve perfect for the gameplay, progressively making things a little bit more difficult little by little by little, without major spikes or major valleys of skill. To be perfectly honest, I think I like Ape Out more than Hotline Miami, and that should say something. Next on the list, let's take a look at Book of Demons, which is 66% off at $8.49. Last year, Book of Demons made my Gameplay of the Year list for good reason. It was a refreshing dungeon crawler that focused less on action and movement and more on positioning, strategy, and not being a dummy and running into a room with 24 enemies blocking you off. There's nice visuals with a tabletop-like paper presentation here, which corresponds with the rail elements of the game that forces a unique element in the Diablo-like gameplay, getting trapped and fighting for your life. While I wanted more classes than the 3 base warrior, archer, and mage, the keep away gameplay as you stay out of range of enemy attacks but try to push forward is repetitive in a good way, with a lot of complexity under the surface. Now, this isn't the type of game that you can dig hundreds and hundreds of hours out of in 1 or 2 or 3 week sittings. You're going to play it a little bit here, you're going to play it a little bit there, and you're going to enjoy it and then let it sort of go away for a tiny bit of time, but then come back. And that's the type of game Book of Demons is. And well, I think that's just fine, and worth your money. Now on the docket, let's look at Frostpunk, 60% off for $11.99. Do you want a hard-ass strategy game where you have to make difficult moral decisions? Frostpunk is the game for you. You have to juggle your resources in not only keeping your villagers fed, but you have to deal with the stinging cold and keeping all your citizens happy, which, let me tell you, is not easy to do. There's so many factors to take into account in decisions you have to make. Should you let kids work for the sake of trying to stay alive? Should you not accept new people into the village because you're unsure if you can support them? Which of the 15 upgrades should I get first, and which is the best option for me to survive right now? There's a good customization for difficulty despite the game's default mode being very difficult. And the interface, while having small little annoyances here and there, works well for the type of game that Frostpunk is going for. Basically, if you love the formula that This War of Mine had, but wanted a little bit more gameplay depth to it and a larger story, Frostpunk is a game that you should be picking up yesterday. Let's travel a little west next with Hard West Collector's Edition, specifically on GOG, for 90% off at $2.49. I admit that I'm a sucker for classic settings such as the Age of Chivalry or the American Western setting, and then having them infused with more magical and Lovecraftian elements. Hard West plays that line well in its interesting story that centers around a few characters, making you wonder what will happen to these men of the Old West. The isometric strategy RPG has some unique features, such as the golden bullet and the ricochet mechanic, that makes you look at the cover system and specifically enemy targeting in very, very different ways. It doesn't overhaul the genre, but the game also gives you a lot of options in customizing its experience, the game's biggest strength, such as getting rid of more complicated mechanics such as combat injuries that carry over from fight to fight, to difficulty modifiers which will make veterans of the genre appreciate the care that went into the gameplay. It's the type of game that you could experiment all around to make a fantastic version of the game for you. So if you pick up the game, realize that you probably want to allocate some time to play, at least around with things. And that's it for my end of the year lists. Now, I wanted to do a little bit more, but I just ran out of time, and if you don't realize why, well, you should probably join the Discord, which is in the description below. Basically, I'm moving. I'm literally driving down to Florida as we speak as this video comes out. So yeah, I've been a little bit busy. And I will probably be busy for at least the next month or so, moving in, getting accustomed to a new job, getting accustomed to a new roommate, aka my girlfriend Andrea. We'll be living together down in Florida, and well, things are just changing. And things will change on the channel in due time, but give me a little bit of time to work out things. Anyway, again, I will try to get more sales in Discord if you join in the description below, and that's it for now.